Well, one Heisman winner, two Heisman candidates technically, and two very good college football quarterbacks facing off in their rookie season in a game with some playoff implications on Sunday Night Football last night between the Washington Commanders and Atlanta Falcons. Washington ends up taking it home 30-24, the final in OT. Atlanta coming out pretty strong, actually. It was a pretty easy first series for Washington in that game. Big win, by the way, for Washington as we break it down. Of course, they are 11-5 and have won 11 games for the first time since the 91 season with that OT win. It's the last time that the franchise won the Super Bowl, and with that win, the Commanders hold the 6th seed in the NFC and can clinch that spot by winning at the Cowboys next week, or if the Packers lose at home to the Bears. Of course, the Commanders last made the playoffs in 2020, but have not won a postseason game since the 2005 campaign. And one reason that I think that they're going to have the ability to shake that one off and end that streak is one Jayden Daniels. Oh my goodness. I mean, that first series looked pretty good for Washington, almost scripted, very easy score for them to get it going. But then Atlanta came out pretty strong as well. After a little bit of inaccuracy from Michael Penix Jr. early on, looked like Atlanta was able to control the first half pretty much. Bijan Robinson, just absolutely ran all over Washington. 82 yards and 2 touchdowns. 90 yards total and 2 touchdowns, but a couple of long runs building up to that early lead in the first half, a 10-point lead. Washington really just couldn't find its rhythm, but then your most likely offensive rookie of the year, Jayden Daniels, it was a little bit of a shaky first half after that interception, but he was nails. Led like a 5-6 minute drive in the third quarter, ended up being a Zaccheaus touchdown, and then ran a little bit as well, had 127 yards total on the night. And yeah, Atlanta was able to come back after a late Washington field goal to tie it. But wow, Washington, able to seal their spot in the playoffs as well as help the Los Angeles Rams eliminate the Seattle Seahawks from the playoffs. We'll get into a little bit of that here coming up in the NFL playoff picture look and kind of diving into these scenarios that still need to be decided and already have been decided. But unfortunately, Washington ending Seattle's hopes. But in that, I think possibly establishing themselves as one of the it teams in the next 3 to 4 years in the NFC with that win. Jayden Daniels, so good at using all the weapons that they have. And then, of course, they've got a running back in Robinson as well. Brian Robinson on Washington's side of things that also can control the running game for them. Zaccheaus has emerged as a huge weapon in the second half of this season. Zach Ertz has been really good all season. And, you can also talk about the coaching with Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury running the offense. Is Jayden Daniels a better weapon for Cliff Kingsbury to play with than Kyler Murray was? There's so much success there. There's just a lot of positives for Washington, Will, and able to fight through such a back-and-forth game last night. They've won in other ways this season as well. It gives me hope for them. I don't think they're going to be a Super Bowl team this year, but it gives me hope for them to make some noise in the playoffs and going forward for the next 3 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, Jayden Daniels has been everything that he's been advertised to be, There was a little bit of a blip where teams were starting to kind of figure out what he wanted to do in the pocket and kind of how Kingsbury wanted to run that offense. And then it feels like the last 2 or 3 weeks, they fixed that. They go and they take down Philadelphia. Now, obviously, it wasn't Philadelphia at full strength with Jalen Hurts leaving in the first quarter with a concussion. But the last 2 games, you beat a playoff team and a fringe playoff team, and you were able to do it fairly convincingly. You were behind in this game early on, and then you just saw Daniels start to run the football more, and his ability to scramble around and get into space, but then also not take hits. It's why Washington was able to take such a big jump this year. It's not like this roster is miles better than it was the previous year. It's pretty much the same roster. Couple additions like a Bobby Wagner, but again, this isn't prime Bobby Wagner. So what you're seeing is what the difference between a below average quarterback in Sam Howell is and what a good to almost great quarterback in Jayden Daniels is. Now, he still has a long way to go. I'm not fully jumping in on Cowherd's take of he's the Lamar Jackson. I mean, we were talking about CJ Stroud being the third, fourth best quarterback in the NFL last year. After this year, maybe he's top 10, maybe. So understand that there's still a long way to go, but Jaden Daniels, he's been all that's been advertised, and I see why a lot of Commanders fans are so over the moon about him.
Yeah, that's a good point, too. You talk about the movement from Sam Howell to Jaden Daniels. You got to talk about, I mentioned Cliff Kingsbury, but going from Eric Bieniemy to Cliff Kingsbury, I think, is a huge transition as well. I would assume just makes the locker room a little bit happier of a place to be. And when you're having fun, when things are just gelling, when you're not really thinking, about what you're doing, when it's just muscle memory and it's coming to you so easily because you've practiced so much and you're playing so well. I mean, for me, things go better when I'm feeling happy, Will. It just seems to roll off. Like I could prepare for a sports radio show a lot, easier when I'm in a good mood than when when I'm in a bad mood. And I just feel like that shift alone from Bieniemy to Kingsbury has paid huge dividends. And the signing of Bobby Wagner as well to help with Dan Quinn.
I'd say it's more at the top, man. I think it's the difference between having a lame owner who, just keeps meddling in everything, and Dan Snyder, and keeps finding a way to mess everything up, and having an owner like Harris who seems to kind of taken a step back. He's letting the football people be the football people, not trying to force his way in. I mean, remember the stories that came out of Washington 2 or 3 years after the fact of where the football people, they have Kirk Cousins in, RG3, he gets banged up, so he has to miss a couple games his rookie year. Kirk Cousins wins them football games to put them in the position to make the playoffs, which they ended up doing. And instead of coming in and congratulating his coaching staff, instead of coming in and congratulating Kirk Cousins, Schneider comes in and talks to RG3 about, hey, don't worry, dude, you're still our plan. We still love you. What do we need to do to make your life feel easy? And instead it's like, hey, let's just get football people in to do the football thing and then enjoy the fruits of their labor. And if they don't do it well, then get rid of them. Cliff Kingsbury, he's always been a good offensive coordinator. Where he gets into trouble is when he's a head coach because he's asked to do more things.
Yeah.
But if you just ask Kingsbury to come in and be a quarterback whisperer and make a fun offense, he's been great at that. He's excelled. And what he's doing with Jaden Daniels, it's 1 to 2 quick reads. Hey, if it's not there on the first throw, if it's not there on my first look, I'm taking off and I'm running. And that's the perfect way to coach Jaden Daniels while you build up his acumen as a passer. And I'm not saying that he's a bad pocket passer, right? He just has this added element that you really need to take advantage of. And in today's NFL, more often than not, if you're running down the sideline as a quarterback, defensive players are going to ease up. So he's not going to have to take the type of hits that earlier running quarterbacks, Cam Newton, RG3,
even Michael Vick
that they had to take. And his game is very reminiscent of Lamar Jackson, who is a 2-time MVP, possibly could be the 3rd MVP season this year. And I think he has a very, very strong argument against it. So why not go and take a version of Lamar or a player with a similar skill set as Lamar and make him your franchise quarterback? It's clear that Daniels is smart. He knows how to run an offense. It's clear that the offensive players want to play for him. So I think, honestly, it's not, hey, it's Cliff Kingsbury, hey, it's Daniels, or it's even Dan Quinn. It's the top. You have a new ownership group in, and they're letting the football people be football people. And that's why you're seeing the success.
That's a very good point, Will. And to the point about Cliff Kingsbury, I mean, you think of the quarterbacks that he's worked with, now Jaden Daniels, before that, obviously, Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes, Johnny Manziel, Case Keenum. He worked with those all in college as well. Like, it's obviously at the quarterback position, it's not a worry when you've got Cliff Kingsbury as your offensive coordinator. And that actually leads to my next question. Do you think that OC Cliff Kingsbury would turn down a head coaching opportunity if he were offered one this offseason, Will, to stay and continue working with Jaden for another season or two? They've got such a window now. He's literally turned them from pretenders to contenders in a season, and now you've got the next 3 seasons with that rookie quarterback and some money on the salary cap to play with.
I don't know that he would be offered. Like, I don't necessarily think that he would turn it down or not turn it down. Because to me, unless you think that, hey, next year there's a spot, like Ben Johnson, for instance. Ben Johnson felt like last year, right, that his team in the Lions had a good shot at winning a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And he also felt like if he didn't take a job this year, he'd be the top dog on the next year's market. He would be able to ask for more of a high price, and he'd be able to ask for more player personnel decisions. And that looks like exactly what he's going to get. I mean, right now he's basically said, hey, if Chicago's willing to bring me the money that I want, I'll help build this team there. I don't know that Cliff Kingsbury is going to get that same love because we've seen him as a head coach. And what's the insult graphic? Basically, once November hits, once you get a little bit past halfway through the season, you fall off. So if I'm a team and I'm going to take a risk with Cliff Kingsbury, which I don't hate, right? He's clearly shown that he can win games with a quarterback and he can turn a quarterback into a star in the college level and at the NFL. I'm not going to be willing to give him player personnel decisions because he's also shown that when he's not just handling the offense, there's a little bit of wiggle room that he needs. He needs more help in that avenue. I don't know that he would get a head coach offer. I personally wouldn't do it. I think if you saw him get offered a head coaching spot, it would be a team and an organization that has kind of stumbled or fumbled their way through the last couple of seasons, probably the last decade or so.
Say the New York Jets, maybe?
So he might be more likely not to take, who wants to take that job? Who wants to work? If they get rid of Daboll in New York, why would anyone want to take either one of those jobs unless it's the only job that they'd ever get? I don't think that Cliff Kingsbury, I think he'll have a better opportunity a couple years down the road where he would get more of those offers, and I don't think that he's going to get that offer this year anyways.
Well, I think that job became a little less attractive if they did fire Brian Daboll in New York after yesterday because they did hold the number 1 overall pick, or at least the biggest chance to get that. Now, with a win, not so much. We'll get to that here in about 20 minutes, and I do have to eat crow on Jayden Daniels before we get out to break because I said before the season, I mean, it was actually long before the season, but when he won the Heisman Trophy, I was bitching saying that, you know what, if he had these stats at Arizona State instead of LSU, he had all kinds of talent around him at LSU, that vaulted his numbers up. If he had those kind of numbers at Arizona State, nobody would have looked at him, nobody would have paid attention to him, and that kind of caused me not to value his actual talent on the field nearly as much as I should have, and I was wrong. Market today, I am admitting, hands down, I am eating crow about Jayden Daniels. I was wrong. The almost sure choice for the Offensive Rookie of the Year has absolutely turned the Commanders into something special, and it's going to be exciting to see where they can go in the playoffs this year. Not sure how far it's going to be, but hey, you never know. It's the NFL, right? I mean, the Packers were in the NFC Championship last year, so anything is possible, and it's obviously a great situation. Any team wants this, where you've got a great young quarterback and a bunch of salary cap room to play with, and you've got another 3 seasons to play with that coming up after this season, where they've gotten their first 11-win season since they were in the Super Bowl and since they won it in the 90s. That's pretty good. So not really a Commanders fan, but good on Washington, and it was a very exciting game last night. Atlanta really did almost get there. I mean, recovering from what Kirk Cousins has basically left them, trying to get any semblance of a season together and still make the playoffs. It was close for Atlanta. But that's actually what we got to get into. We'll dive into the NFL playoff scenarios that still need to be decided. Of course, a lot of games yesterday deciding, some for sure. The Seahawks are out. We'll talk about that and more. But coming up next, it's Will, that's all coming up next. But first, it's Will with SportsCenter.
Now, from the Fan Sports Desk, a SportsCenter update on 1080 The Fan.
First on The Fan, we have a 14-14 tie in the TransPerfect Music City Bowl down in Nashville, Tennessee. Iowa has scored 2 touchdowns. They got 14. Missouri, they've got 14 as well. They're driving right now. 5:09 left to go in the first half. They're just on the other side of the 50-yard line in Hawkeye territory. Later on tonight, the last game of the Week 17 NFL season, the Lions travel to San Francisco. They're taking on the 49ers. No running back David Montgomery for the Lions. He's still rehabbing an MCL sprain in his right knee. Lions, they are hopeful that he will return for the divisional round of the playoffs. Detroit is favored by 3.5, kickoff at 5:15. The Seahawks have officially been eliminated from the playoffs after the Commanders' victory over the Falcons on Sunday Night Football. Seattle will take on the Rams in LA next Sunday for their final game of the season. More sports scores and stories in 30 minutes. I'm Will Ortner at the Fan Sports Desk. Listen live or on demand on the Odyssey app, the Fan's desktop player, or tell your smart speaker to play 1080 The Fan.
Jump back to earlier parts of your